Dear friends, welcome to yet another installment of Strategic Power. In this video, we analyze the forceful statements from the French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, stating that France will not allow a Russian victory in Ukraine, and Vladimir Putin's response, assuring that Russia will not hesitate to use its nuclear triad if its territorial integrity is threatened. Tensions between France and Russia are escalating, with nuclear threats in the air. But can sending European soldiers to Ukraine really stop Putin? Watch until the end to understand all the risks involved in this stalemate and how it could escalate into a global war. Don't miss it. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, we invite you to do so now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. This past Tuesday, March 11th, French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal addressed the French Parliament, highlighting that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has reached a critical point, warning that a Russian victory in Ukraine would represent a real and imminent threat to France and all French citizens. In his speech, the Prime Minister stated that no alternative should be ruled out in supporting Ukraine's defense. His words echoed statements from President Macron, who since late February has emphasized the need to consider all options for supporting Ukraine, including sending European troops. On that occasion, Macron declared that France's goal is to avoid, at all costs, a Russian victory in Ukraine, and Attal reiterated these same sentiments on Tuesday, stressing the importance of recognizing that a Russian victory in Ukraine would pose a significant risk to France, the French people, and all Europeans. Vladimir Putin's response to President Macron and Prime Minister Attal's statements was not long in coming. During an interview with a Russian state channel, Putin assured that Russia's nuclear triad is the most advanced in the world, and that if Russia's territorial integrity is threatened, he will not hesitate to use it. The nuclear triad is a designation that encompasses the air, land, and sea, means available for a nation to launch its nuclear weapons. Currently, only the United States, Russia, France, China, India, and Israel possess the nuclear triad, meaning only this select group of 6 countries has the capability to launch their warheads from land, sea, and air. Through the nuclear triad, a country ensures that even if a surprise attack destroys all of its land and air launchers, there will still be sea launchers, often submarines, ready to respond to the attack equivalently. If nuclear weapons represent the most significant and effective form of deterrence, the nuclear triad represents the pinnacle of that deterrence. The French statement suggesting the possibility of sending European soldiers to Ukraine, along with the already routine but equally terrible and concerning Russian nuclear threats, indicate that the world is closer to a direct conflict between Russia and the West. It is important to note that, given the involvement of nuclear powers, this war could escalate and become a global nuclear conflict. The answer is not necessarily affirmative. Even if France manages to persuade other European countries to send military forces to Ukraine, it is clear that the mission of those military personnel will not be intended for direct combat on the front lines. Instead, they will be limited to training activities, border defense, or at most, air defense operations. It is evident that those military personnel, once in Ukraine, will become legitimate targets, and it is inevitable that some will be injured or even killed in Russian missile attacks, albeit far from the front lines. However, there is a fear that Russia will come to consider the countries of origin of those soldiers as legitimate targets as well. For example, in a scenario where France sends soldiers to the Ukrainian rear, and Russia interprets this as France's official entry into the war, Putin could feel justified in directly attacking the country of origin of those soldiers, i.e., France, which is a full member of NATO. In such a scenario of a Russian attack against a member of the alliance, France could invoke Article 5, compelling all members to provide mutual assistance. If this occurs, a conflict that until then was regional and limited to Ukraine would transform into a European conflict, with the potential to become global. In his speech, Attal also reiterated Macron's statements, emphasizing that a Russian victory in Ukraine represents a threat to France, the French people, and all of Europe. However, how can a war in the far eastern part of Europe pose such a significant risk to the French and all of Europe? It is crucial to remember that just days before the Russian invasion, Macron was the European leader who made the most effort to persuade Putin to avoid war. Macron made several phone calls with Putin and even participated in a summit with the Russian leader in Moscow. Therefore, Macron is more aware than any other European leader that Putin is an untrustworthy man, and he also understands that the motivation behind the Russian invasion was not NATO or an alleged fight against neo-Nazism. Macron and his Prime Minister know that the motivation behind the Russian attack was Russia's desire for territorial expansion and annexation, and that is why they are aware that if Putin emerges victorious from Ukraine, he will not stop there but will continue advancing. First, against non-NATO member countries like Georgia, Moldova, and Armenia, and then against the alliance's more peripheral members, like Finland and the Baltic states. For France, if Putin is not confronted now, a confrontation in some other European country is inevitable. Therefore, for Macron and Attal, it is crucial to confront and stop Putin where he is right now, that is, in Ukraine. The situation is tense. Putin's nuclear threats cannot be ignored, and the sending of European troops to Ukraine, even if only for training purposes, could be the spark that ignites an uncontrollable fire. Macron and Attal may think they are halting the Russian advance, but aren't they actually walking straight into the scenario of nuclear confrontation? They so fear. A war that begins in Ukraine can easily spread to the rest of Europe and the world. Once nuclear warheads start flying, there will be no turning back. Is this really the grim future that humanity is building for itself? Leave your explosive comments on this nuclear stalemate in the comments below. Your opinion matters in this critical moment.